all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including RSS.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us, whether it's on your mobile phone or your computer or your laptop, your tablet. But listen in to Veterans Radio Podcasts. We post something new every week, and you're going to find it informative. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today a documentary filmmaker, Mark Salloum. Mark, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Well, you have an interesting documentary that you've just finished, and it's making its rounds a little bit. We'll talk to it. It's called A Salute to Our World War II Generation, Let Us Not Forget. And I had the opportunity to view it, and I thought, I got to talk to Mark. First off, film documentary and what we do on Veterans Radio is kind of the same thing. You're telling a story. How did you get attracted to this particular story, and which you've put out through Bending River Films?
Sure. The initial concept came probably about 8 years ago. My mom happened to be in a respite center recovering from a foot surgery, and we were in the common space, and there was a gentleman there who happened to serve in World War II. He served under Patton, and he and I got into a conversation, and the next thing you know, 2 hours later, my mom already back in her room, I was just enticed immensely and thought, my goodness, there's got to be something I can do to not just share a story about the war, but share the stories of our veterans. And it wasn't a year later that I was at an event in downtown Plymouth. They have a Memorial Day event every year, which is fabulous. And they had 6 World War II veterans get up that day and speak for about 5 minutes each about their encounters and experiences at World War II. And I said to myself at that time, I have got to do something to pay tribute to these men and women. So it was at that point, in fact, that was Memorial Day of 2019, when I made a commitment in my mind to start working on that film. And we did so later that year.
Well, let me explain to the audience that Mark comes at this with a lot of digital media experience. He has a undergrad and master's degree from Eastern Michigan University, and for a long time has been in the digital marketing space through a company called Highway Media. But that's sort of a different focus than being the coming up with this concept yourself and being the motivating guy who's got to find the people to interview, put the stories together, make the thing go from A to Z in a coherent fashion. Had you ever done this before?
Yeah, we had just finished actually in 2019, the end of that year, a film called Plymouth, Michigan, A Rich History. And that was my first experience in doing a full feature. It was originally not intended to be a feature, but it inevitably became a feature film and had great success. So we had to go through that process of determining how do we build a full-length story. We interviewed 19 people for that film and had to do a plethora of research to find assets such as photographs, headlines, and old films that represented the history of Plymouth. So I did have an initial experience in producing a film of that nature, but it's still not a ton, so it was still a new adventure for me, and this one was much bigger than the Plymouth film.
Well, this thing really has got great individual stories by World War II veterans, by women who supported the effort. I'll get you to walk through all of that. But a really unique hook on this that I want you to explain is you got involved with a high school teacher, and that kind of runs from the beginning to the end of the film. Tell us what that approach was and how you settle on this is the way to make it something different than the, if there is such a thing, ordinary documentary.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I wanted to make sure that happened in this film to start was to make sure that this story was not about the war itself, but it was about the impact of the war on the lives of our veterans before, during, and after their service. So that's one of the big separating factors for the film. But beyond that, we wanted to make sure that it showed stories in unique ways as well, not just from their perspective, but also from the perspective of family members. So we interviewed 9 or 10 of their children. And one additional thing that came to our minds was, how do we get this film in the hands, in the eyes of our youth? Because as that subtitle says, let us not forget, we do not want the youth of our country to ever forget what this generation did for us. So we were trying to come up with a method to really get them involved. And it was just early last year in 2025 when we decided to reach out to the Plymouth Canton Community School System, which we do a lot of video content for them, and say, hey, listen, we want to get a high school class involved. In fact, I've got to give Keith Famey some credit for this, right? A lot of credit, because it was his idea to try to follow this class through that semester. And that's what we did. In the spring semester of 25, we followed this class and assigned them a project. We said, we want you to follow these World War II veterans. And then we took them on a field trip and showed them what it was like to be at the Great Lakes National Cemetery, what the museums were like. And then the culmination of this all came to the Memorial Day parade of this last year, where we marched in the parade with the veteran they were following on a poster board in their hands.
It was really interesting, that approach or vehicle for the film, because we often say here on Veterans Radio, we're telling veteran stories, we're telling history that they don't teach anymore. They never taught in our schools. And for the high school kids to delve into a particular veteran or related subject, they're not really studying the war as much as they're studying about, God, these kids were the same age as, my older brother maybe, who go off and how it shapes them. So it was really interesting to see how you were teaching history and working with the class to do that. So kudos on that. You mentioned Keith Famey. Let's bring him in a little bit on this. So Bending River Films is a collaboration between yourself and Keith Famey, who's a recognized documentary filmmaker here in the Metro Detroit area. How did you guys come together?
Well, strangely enough, early 2024, I had a lot of people that said, hey, you should reach out to Keith. Maybe he can help you finish this film. We were struggling to find the funds to finish the film. And I said, you know what, if I can't do this on my own, I'm not going to worry about it. And it just so happens that Keith reached out to me. And we sat down and I broke the ice a little bit. And I said, so, what is it you're looking for? And he said, I'm starting to get up there in age, and I'd like to have and it's kind of lonely working on my own. He goes, and I've heard your name a lot, in the Metro Detroit area. And I just thought, hey, maybe we can connect and talk about working together. So I said, well, maybe we can. And we spent the next 6 to 8 months meeting for breakfast quite often, talking about ideas, and it just seemed to be the right fit. So by late 2024, we formed Bending River Films and decided that we were going to make this a kind of a partnership for the films. Highway Media still is around, but Bending River Films now is our collaborative effort as a partnership. And our goal is to make anywhere between 4 to 6 films on average per year, and potentially also some series for PBS. These are all going to be PBS documentaries. But,
they fit really nicely into that format. Let's go back and talk about the people you interviewed. You can do it by individuals or segments because, as I said earlier, you've got some veterans, you've got some women, Rosie the River types, you got some family members, kids of veterans. So talk to us how you found them and then put them all together.
Well, I found them pretty quick, at least the first few, when I was at that Memorial Day event. So even though it was in my mind, I quickly introduced myself to the MC of that event, Krista McKinley, and she was an absolute invaluable asset to us in helping us connect with probably 8 to 10 veterans of the 24 that we interviewed. And from that, it helped us to start to create, some leeway into saying, hey, here's something we've got. So we produced a trailer, and now we started to showcase this to organizations. We were getting letters of support from state representatives and mayors and organizations all over Michigan. So having all that was a real big benefit. And then we started to realize that we wanted to hit each and every branch. So besides the 4 major branches, we also wanted to make sure that we tackled the branch of the Tuskegee Airmen. And that was maybe the most difficult to find because even though we had 2 of them alive and, well, to an extent, 5 years ago, they weren't so willing right at that time to speak. So it took a few years, but we finally got Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart to participate. And then the last piece of the puzzle was our Montfort Point Marines, which I had never heard of that division. But we flew down once we heard about it and made some connections. We flew down to Camp Lejeune in Jackson, North Carolina, and we filmed an event for these gentlemen. They were basically the first Black Marines in this nation's history before they integrated. And then we did 3 interviews while we were down there for a couple of days.
And that's one of the things that I think is interesting because in this, hour and a half documentary film, you're able to touch on different things like the waves, Montfort Point Marines, Tuskegee Airmen, each of the branches of service, POWs. You touch on all of this in a way that hopefully inspires the person watching to go, I want to go learn some more about that. Was that a little bit of the intention?
Without a doubt. And, I think anytime I watch a documentary, and I'm always looking for great documentary films, I want 3 things to happen to me when I watch a film. I first want to be inspired. I hope that the film is inspirational and makes me, feel a certain way, whether it's joyous or even, somber. I secondly want it to be very informative, and I want to be able to learn from what I've watched. And then lastly, I want it to be able to initiate something within me in a response. Now, whether that response is to go out and learn more, or to share it with others, or to become more active in a particular community, then I think that's important. And based on that theory, and I've had that mindset for many, many years, even doing marketing videos, I basically transfer that to the documentary world, and that was certainly a purpose. And I'm glad that you recognize that.
Yeah, no, and you some other things you touched on that I thought, well, okay, that's what I want to see. One of the things you touched on was the Great Lakes National Cemetery, because I don't think most folks understand how respectful, if you've served, you have a place you can be buried where you're going to feel the respect of your service. And another was the Michigan Heroes Museum. Most states, Michigan included, have really active military museums and organizations that try to keep this history alive, but they have a hard time getting the word out. So you touched on those two things again. That wow, that's kind of outside the normal bandwidth. Were there areas that you wanted to get to but just couldn't because of limitations?
Well, when you ask that question, you say, were there areas we couldn't get to? What, maybe I can ask.
Well, that you said, I'd like to include this, but I can't find somebody, or I'd like to include this, but I've run out of time, or those sorts of things.
I think documentaries never end the way they start. And I will say that for both my Plymouth film and this feature. And Keith has told me that's happened basically with all the films he's produced. You have a vision in your mind, but it evolves. It becomes its own little entity, an organism, right? So you find that it develops these different branches, and you might find that one of those branches really take you in a direction that you really find to be much more beneficial than the other ones you were going down originally. So when it came to, let's say, those two places, they just happened to stem from that whole educational component, where as we were building that story with the students, we realized that, my goodness, why don't we take them somewhere? They were happy to be in the classroom, but to take them on that field trip was a whole other ball game for them. And yeah, it opened their eyes. As you saw maybe in the film, we interviewed a couple of them there and a few of them afterward to get their feedback, and it really had an impact on them.
I would hope it would also inspire some teachers along the way to see maybe what they could do in their classrooms to bring history a little bit more alive and respect for veterans more alive. I know you've got a stop at we're coming up to, and I don't want to run out of time here. So tell us a little more about Bending River Films, how people can find it and follow, and also tell us a little bit more about how they might be able to see this documentary, which is titled A Salute to Our World War II Generation. Let us not forget. So tackle both of those before we run out of time.
Sure. So yeah, Bending River Films, I think I'd mentioned earlier that we're working on several more projects this year, and we're excited about those, all PBS supported. And we're always looking for support. They range from one is on the train history of Michigan called All Aboard, the Great Lakes Train History. We're doing another one called Laid to Rest, a Michigan cemetery story. And we're going to be looking at the culture of dying and the different unique cemeteries and all the rituals that take place. And a number of other things, farm to table, about farmers and agriculture and the food we eat. So bendingriverfilms.com is a website where people can go, and they can certainly learn about any of these 5, in fact 6 films. The newest one, based on this World War II film, we are doing now a tribute to Just the Rosies. And that one is called Women of War, Homefront Heroines. And that one is going to hopefully be completed this year as well and released later this year. So if there are individuals out there who want to learn more about that or how they can support that, that will be on our website. I think probably by the time you air this.
Good. And if folks want to see these films, you've mentioned a couple times they're on PBS. I know they're on the Detroit PBS. But talk about distribution of the film.
Yeah, so basically the World War II film, A Salute to Our World War II Generation, is available on DVD and Blu-ray. And we also have a streaming version. I don't know if you have a way of adding that to your thing, but I don't have it in the top of my head. But at bendingriverfilms.com, we have the information about the films, and it should lead them to where they can order the DVD. But I could probably find that here in the next minute or so, too, while we're chatting.
Well, we really found this interesting. We recognized and knew some of the people who helped fund it as executive producer or community leaders. some of the individuals who were highlighted in conversation with you through this documentary film. But as I said, it has a much broader appeal, I think. And I think it shows, hopefully, to folks in the nation, hey, don't let these men and women disappear from the face of the earth without capturing their stories, and capture the stories of their kids and even their grandkids or great-grandkids who are in school and maybe need to study it a little bit more. So it was a very, very well done and high-quality film. I recommend it to all our veteran radio listeners. Okay, Mark, did you find the code you were looking for?
I did, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. So the site is, if people want to write it down, so it's Bending River Films with an S, bendingriverfilms.company.site, S-I-T-E. So bendingriverfilms.company.site, S-I-T-E, is where they can order a Blu-ray or DVD of the Loop to Our WWII Generation.
No, that's excellent. We really appreciate the time you've given us today on Veterans Radio, and we hope folks will go to your website, bendingriverfilms.com, to learn more about this story, but others that you're working on, stories that inspire, and then go to bendingriverfilms.company.site in an opportunity to order the documentary film. Mark, we really do appreciate the time you've given us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jim. Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by visiting us at veteransradio.org. That's veteransradio.org. We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. Legal Help for Veterans, a veterans disability law firm with a national practice before the VA. Can help you on your claims and your appeals. It can be reached at legalhelpforveterans.com or 1-800-693-4800. We also want to thank our local sponsors. This would include the Charles S. Kettles chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America, that's chapter 310, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, the American Legion Irwin Preskin Post 46 in Ann Arbor as well, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and certainly the National Vietnam Veterans of America Association. You can be a sponsor by going to veteransradio.org, clicking on the About Us and our sponsors, and help us out. Keep this program alive for the 21 and 22 years. Keep us going for another 20. Thank you.